Hello, and welcome to CyberDeck Users Weekly, a podcast that I do whenever I feel like it, when I want to talk to somebody. And today, I want to talk to James Long. Greetings, James.
Greetings. How's it going?
It's good. Thank you so much. I've had a jackhammer going out right outside my window since 8 a.m. this morning. He seems to be taking a break, but who knows? We're just gonna push through, though. But yeah, James, I forget if you followed me on Twitter first, or I followed you. But we've been mutual follows for a long time, and I've had just a wonderful time throughout the years of following you on Twitter. Back when, correct me if I'm wrong, you used to work on Firefox Dev Tools. Is that correct?
Yes.
Then you changed the whole industry with Prettier, which we'll get into. And then you made some budgeting software and a wild pivot. And now you work at Stripe. Is that a good biography?
Yep. Sums it up.
So yeah, can you walk me through these stages of your life?
Sure. So, yeah, I think Mozilla was a good start. That was really like I worked in a couple of different places after college, but Mozilla was my first like, holy crap, I think I made it. Worked there for like 7 years on several different teams. The DevTools team was the last couple of years, and that was super fun. Being able to kind of work right on Firefox and get a lot of experience there, and just like work with developers. So I did that, helped introduce React there. So I got to know React really well. That's where I got to know it. And it was super cool for a lot of reasons I won't really go into, but like Zool. So Firefox is really weird because the whole front end is this thing called Zool, which is like XUL. It's this kind of like play on this, like there's an old monster Zool that's I think ZUUL.
Okay.
But it's like HTML5 back in like 1999, basically.
And this is something like React that works with regular web technologies, or is this like a weird twist on web technologies for building Firefox?
It's much more of a weird twist because it's basically like all of these tags that you are now used to in HTML5, like audio and video and things like that. Firefox Zool had their own proprietary tags like panel. And these tags were implemented custom, like C++, crazy, super old code base type stuff. And it had all these really weird. In fact, there was even I think there's a different like CSS box model, and it's actually this part was really frustrating. It worked like 99% of the time, the same as normal CSS, but in the Zool context, there'd be that 1% time where it actually diverged from the normal like web spec. And so here I am, a web developer, and I'm like going away, and like your like Flexbox is not like expanding the way it should. And it turns out that's actually a Zool bug that's never going to be fixed ever because right, it's like hasn't been worked on since like 2003. So yeah, that was a fun experience.
But then you guys switched over to React, or you combined React into something even more exciting of a monster?
There was a migration phase where it was even more monstrous. Yes. But that was kind of a necessary evil to get to the phase where we were able to turn off Zool. And I think all of Firefox has actually turned off Zool now at this point. But yes, but that honestly, just a small pitch about React. That's what was so cool about React. Is because it does scope itself down so much. We were able to get it to work in this crazy environment, whereas like no other library would really work that way.
This is something I've been thinking about. I've been in the Rust world, and Rust is searching for its GUI toolkit solution. And something I've realized and I've been thinking about recently is that almost always they come with the state management and the React would call itself like the V in MVC or whatever, the view layer, the thing that paints the pixels. Like almost all these Rust GUI toolkits have both. And in some sense, you need both in the sense that something has to maintain the state of where all the pixels are, right? But like, how opinionated do you have to be in that state management? So that's interesting. That was one of the reasons why React won, just because by being unopinionated in one way.
Yes, and I mean, I think even bigger. I think it could have owned more of the state, but the biggest thing was that we owned the entry point. So when you use React, you actually say react.render DOM or something like that. I don't know. I haven't actually used that top level API in a long time. But you say like render DOM string, excuse me, and you tell it where to render to. Whereas a lot of other like frameworks are like, let me give you the files and they will go off and do whatever they want to with it. So that's also a big difference. But yes, also the fact that it like didn't require these like large other. So yeah, that's one thing that's always resonated. React is growing bigger. It's getting more opinions, but honestly, I think that's a good thing. I think that's just kind of the evolution of libraries. So
Okay.
but it worked out really well at the time.
And so wait, so are the Firefox dev tools still React, or
Oh
are
yes,
they?
they like it caught on pretty quickly, and because the code honestly before was just like really it was just put together in like a let's ship this product way, which is valuable, but it was just like very heavy on the like there was a lot of mutation, and it was just really 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 hard to think about what exactly was going on. So a lot of like when we started doing certain things in React, I think the whole thing got migrated within like 2 years or so. So yeah, so I think it's all React now, and it's I think the team still likes it. I'm not sure. Maybe they hate me. I don't know.
Wait, and so when does Prettier come into the story? Is this related? Is this involved in the?
Not exactly. So Prettier, yeah. So I worked on DevTools for a couple of years, and then I left around I think at the end of 2017, or maybe at the end of 2016. So right as I left Mozilla, one, I knew that I was going to be, so I plan on doing contracting, and as well as developing my product on the side. But as an effort to a small reason why I made Prettier honestly was because like I just felt like I hadn't really done much in a while, and so I needed to get my name out there because I wanted to land contracts. And so honestly, part of it was just marketing for me on my end.
Wait, just for my clarity, because I know that feeling of I haven't done much in a while, and so. Did you think I haven't done much in a while? Then you sat down to think of a project. Then you came up with Prettier, or were you like, I had this idea for Prettier, put it on the back burner, but now that I've decided that it's valuable for me to work on some open source software as a resume item or a billboard. Uh, like
Yeah,
which came first, the idea or the time to work on the idea?
I think I think the idea came first. I can't remember exactly, but I remember it feeling pretty natural. Like uh, I don't think I explicitly really sat down and was like, "Oh crap, I can't land any contracts. I need to do something," and that's why
Mhm.
Prettier. I mean, I think it did was just like it was a very nice like. I had been thinking about this, and I can't remember honestly exactly why I started doing it. I do know that the inspiration came from I had been doing some work in Reason, which is a different language. It's like based off of OCaml, built by some Facebook people. The same, in fact, Jordan Walk, the same person who created React, created this OCaml extension, and it's this language now called Reason, and now it's kind of evolved into this bigger thing. They out of the gate had this. They had this formatter that automatically, like on save, it formatted your file perfectly, and to them, it was a really powerful tool to teach new programmers to this new language because it gives you this like really tight feedback loop of like, did I write this the right way? And Reason is a very strictly like OCaml is heavily strongly typed or strictly typed. And so not only do you have to write code, but you have to write all these types with it. And and I think the syntax is a little funky. So having this like formatter, which validated your format, because the real powerful thing about things like Prettier and very strict formatters, which like reformat the whole thing, it's not just so that you don't have to argue about where a space should go. It turns out that it is actually even more powerful because you can see if how the computer interprets your code, and so you'll see like if you forget a parenthesis or if you forget like some syntax, it will interpret it the wrong way and it will format it the wrong way. It'll be like indented way too far, and you'll be like, oh shoot, I meant to call that as a function. And then when
Yeah,
you wrap it in parentheses and then you format it, it's like, yes, okay, that's the right way to do it.
and I know we dove in real quick talking about React and stuff, but for people who aren't developers, I think it's really interesting. Like Prettier is one of those things. I was a developer for a couple of years before Prettier was on the scene, and now Prettier, like it seems like there's something like Prettier for anything I'm working in. Um, but the basic concept, I want to give it a shot, and then you can correct me. The basic concept is when you're typing code, it's just plain simple text. It's just letters and spaces and returns and tabs or maybe tabs. You're just doing text, and then when the computer runs it, it's going to do a whole bunch of processing steps to actually turn it into something a CPU can execute. And one of those processing steps is called the abstract syntax tree. It's just a way of codifying text into something that's closer to something a CPU. I don't know. Maybe you can better explain that part.
No,
But so
that's good.
this text goes through this transformation, and the way Prettier works is it goes in reverse. So you transform boring regular text into this tree of like this semantic information, and then it pops back out into regular text. But line breaks are deterministic, and the tabs or spaces are exact, and like you do a parentheses and then a comma, and everything is like exactly one way. It only I guess that's what's weird about it. Like, because in writing, there's all these style guides or matters of taste, and then programmers. I mean, people I'm sure have seen the Silicon Valley episode where there's like a relationship destroyed by the argument over tabs versus spaces. Programmers have spent years and years arguing over formatting, and an automatic formatter like Prettier doesn't end all disputes, but it has ended so many of those arguments. It's mind-boggling.
That was a great episode of Silicon Valley too. I was just laughing the whole time. In fact, I don't think I had made Prettier yet, but maybe that was the seed of like,
Oh, there you go.
This is terrible. He lost a girlfriend. Yeah. So yes, that's exactly right. I mean, so I just remembered also another reason why I made it, and that's because I knew I was about to work on my product, and I have been stuck in Emacs. I think like I know I should be using Visual Studio Code, but for whatever reason, I just can't get out of Emacs. I just like too much about what it does, and we don't have to talk about that too much because there's probably a lot of Vim people listening. But,
No, it's good to meet. I mean, it's never been a holy war for me. It's just been like, well, my hands can't make all of those shapes that you need to do to use Emacs, so I'll stick with Vim.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
I do like Vim a lot too. But so Emacs has horrible JSX support. So JSX is what they call when you see stuff that looks like HTML that's embedded in JavaScript. That's what you usually use with React, and React kind of pioneered this idea, which is like you combine HTML and JavaScript. Now we call that language JavaScript JSX. I think it's like JavaScript extensions. It's basically just JavaScript, but you can plop in these like brackets and also do HTML right there. Emacs had terrible support for it. Like I literally could not be coding into it, and I got so mad. I was like, screw this. I think that's why I wrote Prettier. Actually, the more I think about it. So I wrote it just to solve my own problem so that I could get on with building my product.
How did that solve it in Emacs?
Well, so now that I have Prettier, I can write it out terribly at first, and it does like it's really weird indentation where like a bracket flies forward 10 spaces. But then I just press Command Shift F and it fixes it.
Okay, yeah. So this matches my experience. Sometimes, even with Vim, like I'm not great at Vim, and so I'll just end up with a whole bunch of extra line breaks. Like I'll just be passing the arguments in. I'll have like four like empty line breaks, then a comma, then the next argument. Just like I'm just pasting things badly, basically. But then, yeah, I hit save and it all just reflows. Also, in my experience, it doesn't typically reflow wrong because you coded wrong. It just doesn't reflow if you coded it wrong.
So
Um,
if it can't parse it, then yes, it will like show you an error and say, hey, like there's a problem here. But if it can, there's a lot of times when it can be parsed, it just can be parsed in the wrong way because you forgot. Like in JavaScript, there's semicolons, right? So if you most of the time you can drop the semicolons, but there are some times when you can't, and it reads into the next line and will call that. It will like call it as a function if the next line starts with a parenthesis. So if you reformat it that way, then it'll combine the two lines and show you that it was going to call it as a function.
okay. Okay. Yeah. The semicolon thing happens a little bit with like a simple React component. So, okay. And again, because I didn't have a ton of history in the before times, because I also work in Rust. Rust has something called Rust format, which works exactly like Prettier. It, parses the code into an AST, and then it, spits out this idea. So everybody in the whole project works with this exact same formatting. Every time you save, you either format it right then, or some people have like a pre-commit hook. So like before they put the code up into the shared repository, then they run Rust formatted on it. But it's just so wild to me that especially how many times a day are people like running Prettier? like
Yeah.
like
How did we ever not do this?
like billions of times, the trillions of times. I don't know. I probably save a JavaScript document 200, 300 times in a day. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's downloaded more than React now. I could be wrong on that, but at least it's close. It's like millions of times a day. I think it's downloaded even.
And I know you're not actively contributing or managing it right now, but how does that feel that your code is processing? I don't know. To me, it would feel pretty special if just one function I wrote just got executed trillions of times.
Oh yeah, I mean it's great. It definitely exceeded my expectations for I felt like I hadn't really made much of an impact. And yeah, it took off a lot bigger than I thought, and it feels great. And I always do want to give some credit, give really a lot of credit to a couple other people that were earlier involved that really helped it grow, and also just contributors. Like all the contributors are really what made it explode. I do take credit for being the creator, but Christopher Shadow from Facebook really championed it at Facebook. And so as Facebook adopted it and got to 100% code coverage, all of their code was converted Prettier. And I think it was within 6 to 7 months. It was crazy. And so that, I mean, obviously that's a huge indicator. If Facebook is doing it, a lot of other people got interested. Yeah, I don't claim total, the reason for all of its success, but it's super cool that a project that I kind of helped get off the ground is as big as it is. It's super cool. And it is true that it kind of ruins you, because now that I'm at Stripe, I actually write a lot of I never would have thought this, but I write a lot of Ruby code, which is I never would have thought that. But there's nothing like it, and
aren't they working on one?
I think there is one, but it takes a lot of you have to convince people to convert, and because it's not as standard, and I don't have a whole lot of social capital within Stripe yet, so I don't know if I would spend it on a Ruby formatter anyway. So, but it is a pretty bad. I mean, so yeah, whenever I write Ruby code, what happens is that I commit it, and then there's a freaking linter that tells me to put a space before a function, and I'm just about to scream. It's
well, yeah, it's just so wild that that experience that you're having with Ruby is what developers have dealt with for decades and argued about for decades, and now a good majority of JavaScript developers never think about it at all, ever.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So thank you.
Sure, no problem. Yeah.
Thank you for Prettier. And I also think there's something interesting about open source where it's like definitely, I don't know what the phrase is, 1,000 flowers blossoming, or, there's a lot of times when like nobody can decide what the right thing to do is. And so there's like 4 different, implementations of related ideas, and it never really settles down, and the community is split, or there's forks or whatever, but there are some times when people are like, oh, well, that's the way to do it. Let's just contribute to that. And then like, everybody can pile on and, like you said, get that 100% code coverage. And
yeah, it worked out really well. I mean, I think like formatters, especially because there were like 1 or 2 others. There's one called like, I think JS Beautify. But I think in this case, it's like, it's something that you just really don't care about it. And like, it just, if it works, it works well. And I think that was the only crucial thing for it. It's not like an API where there's a lot more opinions about APIs, and stuff like that. And like trade-offs and things like that. In this case, it's like, oh, wow, that like worked really well. That formatted my code. I think it's just easier to coalesce around one. So another fun, Prettier trivia, actually, so Christopher Shadow came to me and he said, okay, look, I'm going to help you build this. And he helped me by like, he added an entire test suite, which I think was all of JavaScript's TC39 or like ECMA, whatever the ECMA test suite is. It was like a bajillion thousands lines of JavaScript. He added that as test suite. And he did the same thing to another person. There was actually somebody else within Facebook that started a JavaScript formatter around the same time. And so Christopher Shadow like kind of pitted us against each other.
Wow.
And it was like, yeah, it was really funny because this other guy was like, because I think that's why Facebook adopted it so fast, because they were already really wanting something. But the other person was writing his in OCaml. Isn't that funny? And I was like, it's cool. I love OCaml, but like, I do think JavaScript tools really excel as JavaScript, especially something like this, which is so driven by contributors. And so, yeah, and not to say that I won. I didn't really care that much, but like, I do think that
it sounds like you won. You won.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just glad there's one thing now that a lot of people use, and it's not, much of a fight.
All right. Well, speaking of something that a lot of people use, I want to talk to you about budgeting software. Everybody's got money. Everybody's got to pay bills. So what if there was software that would help you do that effectively? Have you thought about this?
Oh, man, if only there was one that was local and fast. Yeah. So I started thinking about like finance stuff. I just got really frustrated with myself. Like I just felt like I wasn't doing a good job back in like 2014. And so, as with a lot of developers do, they kind of tinker around with stuff. They do like some spreadsheets and they probably prototype some stuff. So I prototyped a couple things. And around 2017, I started just working on something because I'm somebody who just loves having like one side project that you're working on and that you invest in and you just stick with it for a long time. So it started around 2017, and then around 2018, I think I launched like the Product Hunt. Has like a ship page, or it's a ship service, and it comes with a landing page that helps you like get email subscribers, and you can like kind of gauge the interest. And I got like 2,000 subscribers, and that kind of was like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I should go after this. And so that kind of fueled my. I started thinking about it more as a product. And then, so I started building it some more, and it's basically evolved into this thing that is just the way that I work is that I like to evolve things slowly. And so I've been working on this for a long time, but it is a product that I launched in 2019. I never have really gotten that like exponential growth or that like takeoff moment. So right now I have about 250 subscribers. It's only $4 a month, which is too cheap. I'm actually going to raise the price, but don't worry, if you're an actual user, you're going to be grandfathered in at the current price. But I've learned a lot about just like product development, marketing, and pricing. I have so much more respect for just like all the other people that go around it now. But yeah, so just to explain what actual is, it's a
Yeah.
personal finance product that you the main difference from most other budgeting tools is that it's a totally local app. And what that means is that all of your data is local. And I've developed this like custom syncing engine, which is pretty interesting. That syncs your data across devices. So you have your iOS and Android app written in React Native, and then you have your desktop app, which is on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. And then I also have a web version, and they're all basically using the same backend. And the desktop and the mobile version have different front ends, of course. And then the syncing engine syncs your data across devices. So what comes from that is that I can offer things like end-to-end encryption. So like if you care about that, it's opt-in, it's not on by default. You can actually encrypt your data, and like I can't even read it. And I just think like I think we need to be developing software that's more like that, because it means that the user, even though it's not on by default, it means that like I am not profiting from your data. Like it would be stupid for me to offer that if I was profiting off it, right? Because I would be shooting myself in the foot. But
Well, yeah. Why would you wouldn't I feel like you wouldn't want people's financial you wouldn't want any sensitive data about someone else to be custodying that. That seems just like a huge liability.
yes, I mean, I think so. If you use services like, if you use like, so Plaid is a service you can use to sync transactions with your bank. And if you use a service like that, then Plaid takes a lot of the risk, because they're the ones actually taking your bank user and pass.
Hmm.
If you just have like a bunch of users transactions, that's important data, but I don't know if you're really liable for. I'm not entirely sure what the rules are around that, to be honest. But yes, it's nice for me to know that the user is really the one in control. And I like to think of I like to give users that control. So eventually, soon, actually, I do hope to offer Plaid syncing. I don't offer it yet, but I think it's there's an interesting discussion here about trade-offs, about convenience and privacy, because unfortunately, a lot of people really do want the convenience of automatically syncing their transactions. But the unfortunate thing about that is that you're giving somebody your username and password, and that means that I can always access your transactions, right? Like Plaid does not offer end-to-end encryption. So if you give Plaid that, then I have the Plaid token, which means I can always go and fetch your transactions. But it's a choice that you've made. Like you've opted into that choice, and Actual's architecture doesn't really lock you into that. You just decided on that convenience.
Wait, so you couldn't somehow have the actual client be the only thing the user's client software be the only thing that has this Plaid token and the user is hitting the Plaid servers directly somehow.
Right. So theoretically, maybe some kind of architecture like that is possible. It's not possible with the way that Plaid works right now, because that means that you would be exposing your like account token. So I have an account with Plaid, and I have
Uh,
my secret account. And so if I did that, then somebody could go off and take that token, and go off and create a bunch of accounts, and I would be on the line to pay for those accounts. So
mm,
in the effort of tracking, that's basically how they track billing, right?
right,
There's like a handshake there that my backend server needs to be the middleman. Unfortunately,
right.
um,
Well, it's so interesting. So I've downloaded Actual. I clicked around, and then I was like, I don't know if I feel like importing like all of my transactions. And then I'm like, well, if I went by hand and just started, inputting a budget and like by hand put in all my mom used to balance her checkbook, like just actually had eyes on where all my money's going, I probably would be a lot better with money. But yeah, I right now I use like Clarity, so which is on my phone.
nice.
They have obviously access to my bank account. They also are definitely selling some amount of information, or at least they're like putting ads in front of me of financial products based on some information about me. So not amazing. And also, I think something that else is that's very interesting, not just the privacy aspect, but there's something about local software that if you got hit by a bus, uh, it's the software still works. Like actual doesn't have to die. Like there's been so many services that are online that if they stopped offering that service, well, everything, all the information that I have in that service is just useless now.
Yes, and that's so. There's kind of an effort underway called local first software, and that's what this kind of community is describing this software as, because it's not just your local desktop app that's from the 90s, right?
Right.
This is web-based technology that takes like syncing into account, and it's a whole different kind of a thing. But ultimately, yes, it is a SQLite file that is literally on your hard drive. Like you could go and open up SQLite 3 and query your transactions if you want to. And that is super powerful. So to be totally fair though, I have backtracked a little bit. And if I got hit by a bus and my server went down, it would show you, the UX would basically be a little bit weird. The app would say offline, and I think it might like have a sync error that pops up whenever you try to sync. So unfortunately, it's not totally local first, because like totally local first would mean if my server went down, you would see the sync error, but you could continue to use the app. Basically, right now, the UX is a little bit strange if that happened, and that's something that I've been struggling with, is because like local first software is just the user experience of it is really, really hard to get right. It was mind bending to think of like all these edge cases where like, well, you're offline and now you're coming back online. Are you logged in or are you not? Like, should I require you to be logged in? It's a local first software, so you shouldn't have to be logged in, right? But then it kind of goes against like, well, I have to finance my effort somehow. I need to convert people at some point to pay me to actually fund my work. And a lot of the effort that I did originally, so originally it was actually truly peer-to-peer local first. And you actually took your phone, you opened up the camera inside of the app, and you scanned a QR code on the from your phone.
Now you're speaking my language.
Yes. So this is awesome.
Right.
Yeah, you scanned a QR code that the desktop app showed you, and it literally connected the two devices peer to peer, and it set them up as peers, and then it synced between them, totally not through any middle server. And it was amazing, except it wasn't, because our so this is like an entire different discussion, but like our network infrastructure just is not set up for that kind of distributed peer-to-peer technology. Like our routers and our network address translations, and like you're in a public coffee shop, and you're if you're in a public coffee shop and both your phone and laptop are on their Wi-Fi, you're now constrained to their routers rules. And it turns out that a lot of public routers actually block multicast DNS, which is what I use to discover the devices. And so like I had users that would be like, hey, I can't sync. I was basically debugging like low level DNS issues. And I was like, I'm supposed to be building a budgeting app. Like, what the hell am I doing? So I've kind of backtracked a little bit, but all of the technology is there to make that happen, and I'm happy to like explore that more in the future. But right now you do need to log in, and you do need to like register yourself with my central server. So
right. Well, so to troubleshoot this a little bit, so I know a lot of like Bitcoin type software, because like in the Bitcoin world, you have like your node, and you want to talk to it from another device to like look at the status of your node or whatever, and a lot of them are using Tor, or like VPN type stuff, to solve that like network traversal issue. But the other interesting thing is like your backend server, like if that, again, you want to get paid, but like if that's like open source, that like if it goes down, someone could just fire up new like a new backend server? Because mostly the backend server, are you storing a copy of their data just in the encrypted form, or are you just helping the two devices communicate?
So yes, right. Like at this point, I tried to do the former at first, but at this point, I store their data. Like I have a full copy of their data, and it's just like it's way too convenient because people are out on the go and they enter a transaction on their phone and then they close their phone. And then they want to open up their laptop and sync. That's just what people expect these days.
Right.
But if you,
Yeah,
yes,
that peer-to-peer thing really does require typically like both devices to be awake to talk to each other
yeah,
often.
right. And all of that stuff is super interesting, but I don't think that like budgeting software is the right place to just like really spearhead that. I think there's other, like, yeah, I think like a content distribution network where you're distributing videos and there needs to be like no central authority where if you're spreading a video about, Trump or some other leader and like taking down like information, like that's the kind of stuff to me that needs to spearhead that kind of effort.
Like something that has like a censorship risk or something.
Yes, right.
Right. Or maybe super non-controversial topics could spearhead it just because they aren't going to be attacked. But yeah, like there probably just isn't enough impetus.
Yeah.
I keep on hoping that there'll be some sort of like if I have a server running on my behalf in the cloud or in my home, and then that's like that hosts, some people put like Nextcloud or whatever. If that hosts services like this for me, I feel like that could get a long way. But like you have to have a big incentive to go through the pain. I'm amazed that you went through as much trouble as you did for actual. Like, did you feel like this is like a differentiator that it is local first, or just that's what you wanted in a product, so that's what you built?
So there's other benefits though. That's the real key here, and that's actually why I built this from the first place. There was a privacy aspect to it, but I don't regret it at all, and I'm honestly I'm super happy I did because there's two other things that are honestly the bigger motivators for me as a product person that I think is so cool about it. One is that the app is just like freaking incredibly fast because it never relies on your network connection. And I think it's kind of insane that we actually have gotten used to this idea that like the app's performance depends on your network connection. Like even in this like first world country where we have incredible broadband, like I'm sitting up here in my office and I need to fix this, but my Wi-Fi router is actually on the other side of the house. So I have a gigabit connection, which is an amazing like first world connection, right? But my computer right here only probably gets like 3 megabits, and it's like it kind of sputters here and there, which isn't terrible. But like every now and then, my Wi-Fi is just kind of wonky because I'm going through like a brick fireplace. And I've noticed that like apps like Twitter, like when I open up a tweet and it's sitting there and you see the loading spinner for like 5 seconds. To me, that's just unacceptable. I think we've been kind of like, I don't know. I'm not sure what the right word is. We've just gotten
the opposite
so
of
used.
spoiled. What's the opposite of spoiled?
I don't know. Like spanked. I don't know.
Yes.
We've just been like hit over the head with this web that is phenomenal and beautiful and messy, but like it's just slow. It's so slow so much of the time because it's so dependent on your network connection. So anyway, the app itself, like whenever you ask it a question, whenever you click on something, it always responds within like 100 milliseconds, like always. The only performance problem it can have is a UI performance problem, and that is like totally easily fixable. So that's
and this also you can kind of do sort of fancy queries on the data all local as well, right?
So yeah, that's exactly right. That was going to be my second big reason, which is that like, and I probably should have pitched this at the beginning because this is really the real pitch for actual, which is that you have your data, and so you have the ability to query it however you want to, and so you can build custom reports in ways that other apps just can't even think about. Because you're just running those queries locally, and that's entirely different from sending those queries off into a server, right?
Right. With my Clarity experience is even more like dystopian than that, because Clarity, like they have some sort of directive at the company for like visual novelty. Like if the app looks the same every time you load it, people maybe get bored or something. so so you just scroll through Clarity and you see whichever reports they feel like showing you that day. It feels literally random. Like I hope they show me my monthly spending this time. But yeah,
Oh, it's terrible. That's
yeah. I mean,
terrible.
it's yes, it's terrible.
I know of Clarity, and I've dug through their app to be inspired from as a like UX standpoint because I think it is
Mhm.
beautiful. But man, hearing
Absolutely.
that's terrible.
It's just random. It's just random, whatever reports you get. But yeah, I think there's something to, and this is kind of get so. Literally, the prompt that kicked me into gear to get you on was you tweeted, um, "I want Rome to be not just a tool for thought, but a tool for computation." And you had been tweeting some thought. You've seen the light on note taking with Rome, and it seems like a lot of that has to do with being able to like query your notes. But like I think it's really interesting. I mean, possibly even more interesting in the sense that your budgeting software is in some sense structured data, so you can get really interesting queries and insights. And I've always I felt like we were kind of headed this way when like there was a lot of the talk of like the quantified self movement, maybe like around like 2010-ish. It's like just as fitness devices were taking off, uh, we were like, oh yeah, we'll like track stuff about ourselves and then we'll use it to generate reports and make insights into how we're living and maybe how we can improve how we're living. And I feel like what happened instead is that everything that we ever tracked got stored in someone else's database. And it was up to them whether or not they were going to make a report. And it definitely wasn't cross referenced with anything else, because, that would be like would have horrible privacy implications. But like if somehow all of this data, all of my data, all the data I'm most concerned about that has meaning for my life is in little SQL databases on my computer, that theoretically I or somebody else can create software that can have a lens into that and help me like understand it better.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right that my train of thought for the like this like querying structured data in Rome. I had been thinking of these thoughts in actual and trying to because I feel like I've been working on actual for like a really long time. But like I said before, I just like to take things slowly and evolve it slowly. And I'm working towards something that I feel like I have not hit it right yet because I haven't even introduced custom reports. But that's the thing that I've been trying to get to. So when I use Roam, and honestly, you can tell that Roam is mostly a local app because it's got this like long ass loading screen, but then it's like super fast. Like I compare that to Notion. So yeah, this is getting into like comparison, but like I love Notion's design, but like in Notion, when you go offline or if you come back online after a long time, you click on a page, there's like a 90% chance that that page is like not in the local cache or whatever. And so you're
Mm.
sitting at that local spinner and it's slow. It takes like 5 to 10 seconds to load that one page. But that has not happened to me in Rome ever. Like when I open a page or do a query in Rome, it's always like instant. So it's great. I know that it's a local app. So back to like performance reasons, that's
And
why
just to
it's
be
so great.
clear, local in the sense that it's using like the browser technologies of like local storage. It's still like it's at a URL in your browser.
Yes, yeah, totally, absolutely. It's still like Rome doesn't even have like local desktop versions of their app yet, but you can tell that all of the data is sitting in the browser somewhere, like in the local database.
Mm.
Um, and they must have some way to like sync it up too. I haven't really looked into that, but yeah, it's unfortunate that we've gotten so reliant on the cloud, and you hear these stories, where Google shuts off a service and your Nest thermostat's probably going to be dead in like 2 years. It makes me sad. It really does because it's just I don't know. It's sad. It's sad for many reasons, but
Yeah, well, something that would always drive me Slack just had a big outage this week, and something that would bug me when I worked at The Verge was, we're primarily a New York based business. And I feel like there would have been a time if we were all going to be nerds chatting with each other that would have happened over IRC on our own server, possibly in the same literal actual hosted in the same building as us. So like I could have imagined a time when if our internet went out, we could have still talked to each other.
Yeah.
but but we like some totally remote service goes down and we lose the ability for our computers, which are all networked locally, to be able to talk to each other. Like we don't really have like, I feel like over time, like there was a time when I was pretty good at setting up a computer so that it could like send a file between one computer and another over like regular, like I don't even know what it's called anymore. Like there was Apple Talk back in the day, but there was also weird ones where like you could go Windows to Mac, and that was kind of difficult. But now, like if there's no AirDrop, it's over. It's
Yeah.
either AirDrop or email, or we're just done.
That's true. I had forgotten about like I remember carrying around my laptop with an Ethernet cable, and I would literally go up to another computer and pop that Ethernet cable in, and I'd move a file somehow. I don't know why I would do that, but I haven't done that in like 10 years probably. But because now I just go through the cloud.
Yeah. So like, and I really like the emphasis, the querying that you can do and the speed that you can get like motivations, like, cause like people probably aren't going to build local first software just out of the kindness of their heart. They need to have some sort of incentive to do it. But if the incentive could be like, hey, we could build you way better software that is way more performant, and has X feature that isn't really possible from cloud-based stuff. Um, I don't know. I
Yeah.
feel like that could be exciting, and I think it's interesting of how much you had to invent for actual. I mean, I know like in the background, like and you did like a blog post about your CRDTs, and CRDTs are complicated enough that I feel like on a non-visual medium for people who aren't necessarily developers, probably a tough sell to explain. But like you had to invent technology to allow you to do local first. It wasn't just deciding to do local first and then you're done. There's a lot of new stuff that has to be invented to make it easy or possible.
Yes. I mean, it was, it's one of those things where if I totally started from scratch, I probably wouldn't do it again. It kind of makes me sad to say that, but it was
Mm.
just, it wasn't the smartest. So I did this at a time. There was like 2 years where I really did try to make this my full-time gig. And as a product focused person, it just like, that's like the textbook 101 where you're working on the tech, but you're not actually making sure the product is even like a problem that people have. Right. So all these like all the marketers and like other people right there were probably laughing at me. It's just like I was going off and I spent like a year building this syncing engine. But to be honest, like I had fun and I don't regret it at all. But it is true that like if you wanted to build a company, like that was absolutely the wrong choice. But you don't always have to build like a company though. I wish that I could have made it my full-time gig, but it's still a potential for the future. And right now it's like, and so why I joined Stripe was because it turns it into what it really was, which right now it's just like this really fun and yet serious side project. And now I can treat it that way. And now it's just a lot of fun. But yeah, I had to so I really did almost quit like a couple of times, but I had a friend of mine that knew about these like CRDTs and all of this syncing technology. And he was kind of egging me on and being like, no, like we will be here to help you answer questions, but you should do it this way. And so I started looking into it and I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. And so now I have like a bunch of blog posts and content that I want to write because it really is like a new way to do things. But I think it's just a really fascinating way to do things too.
Okay, so let's get into CRTTs just a little bit.
Oh boy.
What's it? Conflict-free replicated data types?
Yes. So the
Okay,
funny thing is, I think there's like 3 different versions, but yes,
sure, I'm
that
sure.
is one of them.
So my thinking, so my dream app is a note taking app, right? And what's important for me is that it's a folder of text documents, and that folder of text documents could be like enhanced somehow with a SQL-like database just for like improved faster searching or something like that. But I want the source of truth to be the folder of text documents. So my thinking of the best way to sync that to the cloud or to another machine or whatever would just be to use like Git version control. So which you basically you make a change to a file and then you sort of publish the difference. You say here's the change that I have made, and like because I'm basically a single user, I'm not hopefully not making too many conflicting changes, and I could just store both of the conflicting changes if I need to. It's not a huge deal because it's just some plain text. So I have that mental model pretty well. Why would CRDTs be better for money?
So CRDTs are really just, I mean, that's a great way to think about it. I think Git is a good model when you start thinking about like text in a lot of formats. But it's really when you start thinking about like a distributed system where you have maybe 3 computers. The problem is when like 2 of them go offline and they go offline at different times. And so basically all 3 different devices have different versions. So if you went offline and then you made some changes and then you came back online. So Git is one potential reason or one potential solution for that. Um, the problem is that I think the way that Git does diffs, it's not going to be good enough for it's not granular. It's not really granular enough to sync up changes. And I think so. It's taking me just a minute to formulate my thoughts. Here's the big difference. It's that conflict free part. That's the real critical thing here is that when you're building a product, you really don't want conflicts because end users, unless they're like really, really technical or like they're even working on code or something, um, resolving a conflict is just weird. Like, why would you ever ask a user to resolve a conflict? Um, Ideally, it should just figure out like one working solution and just provide that. And if it's the wrong one, you could potentially provide a way to like backtrack and then choose a different solution.
Hmm.
But just from a product's perspective, like I never want to be using Trello and then go in and say, oh, there's decide between these 2 cards, right? That's a terrible user experience. So that would be the thing that I would forewarn you about is just make sure however you um, do it in a way that like hopefully doesn't make them choose between a conflict or like manually because even I as a developer in code, I hate resolving conflicts. Like I probably did it wrong and then I cause a bug or something, right? Um, I, in a perfect world, Git would know enough and would be able to do that. So what CRDTs do is they force you to encode things in a way that there's never a conflict. And that sounds magical, but it's just because of the way that they work. That doesn't mean that the end resulting solution is like the best, but a user can always go in there and like tweak it to be what they actually wanted it to be if they want to. But especially for money and finance, I can always ensure what would what would you do if the user didn't resolve that conflict? Like the app is essentially you would have to stop the entire app and force them to do that because otherwise it doesn't make sense to have like a conflict with money, right?
Right, right.
Because like what balance would you show? But yeah, so CRDTs is a way that like always ensures that like I have a correct data, a correct transaction set that I can query the balance of. And if 2 users change the amount of a transaction at 2 different times, and then when they synced up and it resolved to the wrong amount, then when there's like a reconciliation process that you can do, and when they do that, they will see, oh, like our balance is wrong, and then they will essentially resolve that conflict by going back and seeing that the wrong one was chosen. But in reality, for this kind of app, like that just really doesn't happen very often, because there's really only like you only have like 3 or 4 devices max in use, and they're not like heavily used. Like it's for text stuff, like the stuff that you're talking about, that does get more complicated because text is just harder to sync up, and it's like there's usually multiple people typing at the same time, and so there's a lot more chances for conflicts. So it's a big research area about using CRDTs in text-based applications, and there's like it's a whole different realm of CRDTs basically than what I use. So I think that's a lot of that is in research, and but I think your idea of just using a Git model could work. It just you kind of have to figure out the user experience of it too.
Yeah, I don't think it would solve the multiplayer text editing, which is frustrating. And it feels, like it's a regression compared to like Google Docs, but like also like Google Docs is up in their cloud and it's not coming down anytime soon. And it's just so important to me to have that my own folder of text files, which, speaking of which, we're almost an hour in already. We should really get to Rome, because this is what's kept me from Rome. Rome looks absolutely amazing. It's a note-taking app. Basically, it's entirely browser based right now. Hopefully they will have mobile apps in the future. They got a bunch of funding. It's paid. It's kind of local first, like you were saying. But what makes Rome so special?
I think the main thing for me is the fact that it's well, there's 2 things. I'm surprised at how much I like that it forces an outline view. So like every single thing that you have in there is a bullet point, and it's either like it's either at the top of it's either like a topmost bullet point, or it's under another one. That has really helped me structure my thoughts. Like I can't just like go off and write like a freeform paragraph. I'm realizing that I previously used to like write a lot of prose when I should have really been thinking about like distilling it down into the points first, and then I can go back and like expand it later. That's one thing that's impacted me at least. And then of course I have to mention that the cross linking is like way more powerful than I expected. And obviously that is kind of the killer feature that Rome markets itself on, like where you can link to pretty much any single piece of information in the entire system, even like a nested bullet point that's like 4 times nested. You can link to that from somewhere else, and then you can jump between them in really creative ways.
Right.
So
people have just called it like bidirectional linking, in the sense that when you create a link from one thing to another thing, that other thing now has some way of kind of showing you that it's linked to the previous thing. I don't know if I'm totally explaining that very well.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So there's at the bottom of every single page is a reference linked section, which lists all of the references that link to this page, and they show you like if something links to a block deep down in that page, it will show you the block that is linked to, and then it will show you the block that links to it, and so you can go down and see all these like interesting links to it. And it's interesting. It takes a while to get used to, but like as I've developed I have a whole like to-do system in there now. And so it's all of that. So I actually did do a tweet. I say there's 2 things as like the topmost features, but really I actually tweeted something a little bit later that was like, links are actually not the killer feature in Rome. The killer feature is queries. And I love how Rome frames this, where so queries are a way that you can like write. You can say, give me all of the references that link X and Y, or you can do X or Y. But you can nest, like just like any programming language, you can also say like X or Y and Z. And so you can like nest these expressions and create this complex query. But the way that the Rome authors frame this is that you should be able to ask questions about your data and get back answers. And that really resonated to me as a creator of Actual, because that's like exactly what I'm going for with actual. Um, and I don't know why. I just like the way that they put that there.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I want to do with. I don't know what I've had a lot of different eras of note taking. I'm kind of in the doldrums right now because basically my note taking software died. I was using Simple Note, and Simple Note
I
stopped
remember that
syncing
one.
stopped syncing with notational velocity because notational velocity is abandonware. Basically, Simple Note's abandonware, notational velocity is abandonware. So now I just have a folder of text documents on Dropbox, and then like my half working note search software running to like search through them. Because I'm very into like full text search, and notational velocity always encourage basically every time you search for something, and if you can't find anything that relates to it, you just hit enter and you start a new note. So I just have thousands of very small fragments of notes. Um,
Cool.
but yeah, what do I like? How do I get value out of it? You know, I wrote all this stuff down, and for a long time, I felt like it was a real appendage, and now it feels kind of foreign and not working very well. And I want to get value out of this. I want to um, like realize some of the themes in there and like build them into something, or like finish half completed blog posts that are hidden somewhere in there, or find all my startup ideas, or all these kind of things. Like, yeah, I want to ask questions for sure.
Yeah, and that's so. I mean, even just if you dumped all that information into Rome, and you just like over time, as you were reading them, you just added those square brackets, which link the pages together.
Mhm.
Um, it is a really interesting model. I mean, honestly, when Rome was coming out and was getting really popular, I kind of passed it off. Like I used it a little bit, and I had like these. It had bullet points on every single line, and I hated that. I just wanted like a clean page. But I gotta say, like I believe it now. I mean, I see how those links really do help you dive into that information in like super interesting ways. It's pretty interesting. Um, and it's also just to kind of a little bit of a jump, but it's a beautiful mess. It's like the best kind of like, I love good product experience and things like that. But at my heart, I really do love like crappy, beautiful web mess products because it's like, it's ugly. It's like kind of janky. It's like got like weird bugs. Um, it has this like really cool feature, this is actually what prompted my tweet, where you can theme it. And like, guess how you theme it? There's no official support for themes, but the way that you theme it is you go into and you create a Rome/CSS page, and you create a CSS block. And in that CSS block, it's just like, it's like the triple backticks and like Markdown.
Mhm.
You write CSS, and then you click away, and it will just automatically apply that CSS because you're like Rome/CSS is a special page, and it automatically applies to the whole page any of the CSS blocks that are on that page. So you can go in there and write like body open curly brace background color equals black, and then the background color of your entire page will be black. And it's just like, it's so bad, but it's so great. It's so great because like
I don't
it's
know if I
so.
hate that or like it.
Yeah, I know, but it's that's like the early web to me. I guess that's like, I just remember the early web kind of really embracing this kind of hacks, and it's beautiful. But it gets even cooler because you can create multiple blocks, and every single Roam page has a filter button in the top right where you can press open, and then it lists all of the all of the linked references there, or all of the like links. And so if you name your blocks as links, so you can say like main style, and then you can say like homepage style. You can filter out. You can say, don't show these certain blocks. Don't show the blocks that have the links that have like tomato CSS or something. And when you hide those CSS blocks, it removes that CSS from the page. So you can actually, there are themes out there that people make like 10 blocks, and you can like disable parts of the theme just by hiding those blocks. it's beautiful. I don't know.
Right. So you're on this page, the slash CSS, which is just a note in Rome, but it's called CSS, and so that's the style that's applied. And then there's multiple blocks of styling in there. But if you hide one of the blocks, then that block of styling stops being applied.
Yes. Yeah, it's great. I mean, and like you were hiding that block just like you hide a block in any other page. Like there's nothing
Right.
special about that.
Right.
It's so awesome.
Well, I see that's like so okay, when you talk about a tool for computation, like I mean, like I mean, it kind of looks a little bit like having code and then prose. Like that makes me think of like Jupyter notebooks. Like is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah.
What is the? There's something I forget what it's called. It's like observable HQ or
Observable
something.
HQ. Yeah, that's like a notebook. Like any of the notebook style ones. Observable is one of them. Jupyter has notebooks. Like Mathematica has like notebooks, I think. It's kind of a researchy way of doing coding.
Mhm.
But like yeah, like you write code and then in Observable HQ, as you like click away or you press enter or something, it evaluates the code and it replaces that code block with the result. And so
Mhm.
if it's like data, you'll just see a table or like one single value. Or if it's a visual representation, you'll see that graph, and then you stack up these. There's like your whole page is just a list of these blocks that you can edit, and it's reactive. So as you edit one, you'll see like you can reference blocks, and then you can change things. So it's definitely to me when I started doing this, I was like, oh man, this would be awesome. Because it's also like it embraces even more so like Observable HQ doesn't have any like there's nowhere that you can easily I don't well maybe there is, but it doesn't really embrace like note taking. It's kind of like an afterthought, but obviously in
Mhm.
Rome that's like the primary use case. And so
Right.
I found myself writing notes and then also like embedding these little JavaScript snippets all throughout that. And it's also outline based. So like I'm writing like an outline, and there'd be places where I'm like 3 levels indented, and then I will write a note. And then below that, I'll write like a JavaScript block. And so there's just like notes and JavaScript blocks like intertwined in this like indented random outline view. And I just thought that's super cool. I found myself like being like, wow, I could really think about code this way, because it's kind of the like where Donald Knuth had that like idea about literate programming, where you're literally like writing prose next to the code.
Mhm.
And I just thought that's super cool. I don't think you're going to go and build Stripe with that, but I think you can when you're starting to build a product and you're still in that like kind of wandering phase. I think it's a super interesting approach to it. Um,
Yeah, the I mean, I know from as like a consumer of APIs, Rust has this thing. You can do doc strings up above like a function, and then you can also do you can put example code in there, and Rust will actually run your example code as like part of the tests and stuff, just to make sure like this example code is real. And so some of like my favorite APIs in Rust, like you can go look at the doc string up above a function and see an example of using that function, and then it gets rendered out into like documents and markdown. But I think there is something really interesting about like that's so valuable of explaining how or why this code exists, right there, right on the spot. um, and yeah, how to make that more of a, I don't know. I feel like there's something there. Like, can that be? Because most code is really siloed into big text documents, and
yeah.
folder structures.
Yeah.
Especially
And there's,
JavaScript. People love folders so
oh
much.
yeah, I almost, yeah, I love, give me like a big 1,000 line file. It's the best. It's the best. Yeah. I think there's types of code that I think that's fine, but there's types of code that really like the writer spent like a week thinking about this, and there's a lot of thought put into the like this 100 line of code. Um, and for that kind of code, I love me some like 100-line comment block type code. But yeah, there's also just like times when you're just researching stuff and it's just kind of, I would rather sit in Rome, and if only it would evaluate this JavaScript and I could like see that output somewhere. I would love to sit there and like, that's where I would do my research rather than like sitting in Emacs or something.
Yeah, and so I mean, how far do you want to take this as a tool for computation? Like, what would your like totally ideal setup be? Like, is this the blinking cursor when you boot the computer? Is it's Rome, but it can execute code or something?
It's, I think I'm pragmatic enough by this point that I don't think that's my ideal. I think it is good as an application for thought. And like, but the fact is that you're not always thinking. Like you like in Stripe, we do a ton of work that's not really thoughtful. It's just grunt work. Like it's just making sure Stripe processes payments and does a lot of other things. And those things don't really require this kind of environment. But like there is a time when you really want to sit down and think about like, what can we do that's different? What can we do that like we need to kind of take a week and not program very much, but we should think about smaller bits of code and like write out our ideas. And I think that's where this kind of environment excels. I don't think we need, something like Smalltalk, which was this like pretty interesting environment where basically programming languages, like the whole code was everything. You could like introspect everything and open it up, and like code was like kind of a first language, a first class thing in like Smalltalk. It's interesting, but I don't think it's, for me, this is just more like it's a tool. It's something that you can go to when you are in that sort of researchy, thoughtful environment. And it's, so I don't know, to me, it's something that you could use. But Emacs and VS Code and Vim, they're always going to be there as the productivity like killers, right? Like that's where you go to like actually write like real big software. So I think there's, there's like some middle ground there, and but for me personally, I like it as just kind of like, yeah, like a place I go to think. And yeah, if it would only like evaluate some things here and there. Do you remember Eve? I think we talked about light table a long time ago. I think that's how we started talking. So
Yeah.
Eve, like I keep thinking about Eve. Like Eve, I feel like was kind of trying to hit on this, where Eve was like Rome, but for computation. And I think that they just bit off. I don't know if they went the wrong path or if it's just too hard of a problem. I feel like they got too technical. That was my gut reaction, is that they got too technical. And so they lost sight of the end user, like real purpose for what they were doing.
They kind of reinvented the whole world to get their idea through.
Right. Which is great.
For people who aren't familiar, who was this? Chris?
I forget his name.
Chris something. I'll find it. So there was this thing that came out like, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, called Light Table. And it was a text editor IDE type thing, specifically designed originally at least for Clojure, which is a Lisp variant on the Java virtual machine, which still seems to be around. But what was really cool for me, because I was like brand new to coding, and what Light Table would do is you'd write out your functions and you'd write out you'd use your functions, and Light Table, as much as it could, would pass values through your program live. And so you'd, in the gutter on or to the side of your code, you'd see what was like the actual data that was flowing through your program. And as a new programmer, it was the most helpful thing that has ever happened to me, because like, these words and verbs and syntax you're using just feel so arbitrary, and you don't know what's happening at first when you're programming. And so to see it so tangibly, so Light Table was just this wonderful thing. And I don't totally remember why it died, but the team moved on to this other project called Eve, which had some similar idea of the data flow being somewhat introspectable, but I don't, I kind of lost the plot there.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was that was good backstory. I mean, Eve, they kind of took a light table and took what they learned and was like, hey, this could be even bigger. And then, so Eve is this like an actual programming language that it was this sort of literate programming where you could write prose on right beside these like, I think you defined facts and then you could query the facts. It was interesting, but I do think about Eve when I'm in Rome, because it's like I have these queries and I have these JavaScript code blocks. What if I could like query JavaScript code blocks, and that creates a stack of JavaScript blocks, and then it evaluates those in order. I feel like that's where Eve was going. But I think that's a super hard problem. Like I'm not going to ask anybody to do that, because I think you get into really weird things. Like, I mean, you're basically talking about an entirely different semantic model for programming. If you can like query, because queries are dynamic in Rome, so when you change something, the queries can change, and so you don't really want to change something over here and then a bunch of other things in your system to randomly change and break. But it's an interesting thought process, at least.
It is something I think about. So are you familiar with like Microsoft Fluid? Have you heard of this?
I've heard of
Fluid
it. Yes.
framework, which I don't know. Microsoft, I feel like, is actively vague on how they talk about it, and I feel like it's a bit of a moving goalpost already. But the idea seems to be like you could have a view into an Excel spreadsheet, but you could embed it in some work chat or on a web page, or you could use it as like an API. But like that portions of documents could be live and like collaboratively editable like Google Doc, but like they are freed from just being in that one view. They can be embedded in other documents or in other contexts, which always brings me back to a touchstone for me forever, because I remember when Steve Jobs killed this, but OpenDoc, which was this concept of like this open standard for Office documents where it could be kind of piecemeal and it wasn't just monolithic Excel and Word docs. But that didn't work out. But so I think there's something really interesting to having sort of live views of things. Like it's kind of like iframe is basically like just embedded information from somewhere else. But like have it that could be. Now I'm like really spiraling, but like, do you know the Xanadu project?
Yes,
Like
I have that written down in my notes, actually.
yeah, like this, or like kind of the precursor. They say that Tim Berners-Lee like ripped them off of the whole concept of like hypertext and linking between pages. But one of the things that makes Xanadu different than the web is that you would have a citation, like you'd quote a piece. Like let's say you wrote a blog post and I wanted to quote your blog post, I would like quote a paragraph from your blog post, and I wouldn't copy and paste that paragraph. I would be somehow, at least this is my understanding, I would be sourcing it from your blog post. But like you said with Ro, like what if stuff changes underneath your feet? Like that could really get messy really fast.
I mean, you have like a history. I mean, I don't know. It's sort of like a Twitter edit button. Like, do you really want that? Or I don't know.
Twitter already feels like that, to be honest. Any interesting tweet seems like it gets deleted, and so then you're like looking at people reacting to a tweet that's been deleted, and then like what did they say, and then someone like screenshots it, and like yeah, imagine a whole internet like that.
That's true. Yeah, I guess you could. Yeah, make the case that Twitter should just do the edit button because people are already doing it in just a terrible way.
Right. Right. Or do it, have have a revision history.
Yeah,
I think.
That's fair.
Wait, but yeah, what were you, what did you have Xanadu down for?
I was thinking of while I was working with Rome, I had the same connection where I was like, this feels like Xanadu. Like this has the same recollections. Xanadu was Alan Kay, right? Is that right? Because I feel like the Rome authors, I think, have like been talking to Alan Kay. I've heard that they just
Xanadu's Ted Nelson.
Ted Nelson, that's right. Okay. I think Alan Kay had some interesting like insights about it too, or something, which wouldn't be surprising because Alan Kay is awesome. But yeah, so no, I mean, it's the same concept. And so I just had it down. And when I was going through Rome, I was like, hey, this is kind of cool. This is kind of like, what if the web was actually like this? This would be incredible. Um, but
Well, well, and I think there's things like that. Like I was working on this project. It was a bit of a goof, but I had fun with it. It was called Calculator 2. And one of the thoughts I had along the way is like if there was an AP, if I had an API, like, and this is dumb information, I probably wouldn't even share this on my personal API, but you can imagine going to like pauljmiller.com/API/weight, and you'd get an integer, like a 3-digit integer that would be my weight, you know? And if you, so your calculator software could like query other people's personal APIs. A more practical version of this would be like, you know, for calendaring, like, you know, you could query your friend's availability, or those sorts of things. But like, you could really imagine a lot of ways where we could be, or you know, like I was saying earlier with the quantified self, just being able to query your own information would be really helpful, if we had more of our data in accessible or structured formats. Like I think that's what maybe makes Rome so interesting, is that like it's just, I feel like it's just scratching the surface. Like there's so much we're not using our computers to do yet.
yes, yeah. There's something super powerful about like freeform apps, and I mean, that's kind of why it resonated with me, and that's my vision for Actual. To be honest, like I want it to be this freeform app. It's been really difficult to make that work, and that's why it's not yet. But yeah, there's something really powerful in this. Like I've made this entire to do system in there. I've sort of programmed a to do system in Rome, and I just love that. It's awesome. Um,
Yeah, what makes something a free form? Like, is there? It's just, is it just having enough different tools until you start getting emergent behavior, or is there some secret sauce to it?
I would say, I mean, I would say that there are apps that focus on a couple fundamental building blocks, and then they provide you with some UI that is some sort of like generic UI. Like a spreadsheet is a freeform app, right? Because it gives you this structured UI, but they're all like cells that you can build up as many cells as you want. Rome, you can build up as many blocks as you want. And Actual, I
Hmm.
hope that you can build up as many like I mean, I don't know what I'll call them, like blocks, but like I could envision the reports being like a stacked list of blocks that you could stack horizontally or vertically. To me, that's what a freeform app is: the ability to query your data, or have some fundamental built-in block. Like in Rome, it's a block.
Hmm.
In a spreadsheet, it's a cell, and then you can program those blocks. Like in Cell, you can put a spreadsheet, or you can put a query in those cells, and then in Rome, you can put a query in a block. That's to me what I call like a freeform app, and then you can sort of build up your stuff on top of that. Because literally, like Rome uses linking and filtering for all of its features. Like that CSS thing that I was talking about. It literally reuses those two fundamental concepts for like everything. Which means it's really janky like half the time, because like it's stretching it pretty far. But I think it's a really powerful way to do it. Um,
Yeah, the other building block that I think about a lot that I feel like I haven't seen enough of out in the rest of the world is like Unix pipes. Like the idea that the output from one program can be the input to the next program.
yeah, totally. It's the same concept where you can like build up your own workflow, and then you can even wrap that into a function, and then you can just call that one function, and then like you can leverage all of that too. Um,
Well, there's a lot. It sounds like there's a lot of work to do.
yeah.
But you're just like in Rome. Like you don't feel like like it sounds like it's working out for you. Like it's got enough going on that even if you could imagine more things, it's doing enough already.
So far, so to be totally fair, I created an account in Rome before they had the paid plan, which means I don't have to pay for it right now. Um, it is $15 a month, which I feel like for what I'm using it for right now, I don't know if I would pay that much. I wish it was like $10 a month, but um, I'm using it as my to-do system. I haven't really had time to like, I want to read a book soon and I'm going to try to like make notes as I read that book. If I start building up a vast kind of what you had, or you talked about you having like a vast knowledge of notes, I could see myself paying that. It's a little bit pricey, but yes, so far it's, besides the price being a little high, then yeah, it's got enough for me to kind of have it as a pinned tab and always be kind of making notes in it.
Yeah, my thing is just like, do I want to submit to them and be their vassal? You know,
Makes
like
sense.
basically, like they offer so many more things, more functionality than I have with my folder of plain text documents. But like, I'm always going to need them to be around to keep doing that, and I'm going to need them if I want new features. They're only going to come from Rome, unless they add some sort of total hackability layer on top.
Sure. Yeah, and to be honest, I kind of felt that way about budgeting, so that's why I built my own budgeting app. So
All right,
that's totally
I
fair.
probably shouldn't give up my dreams of a note taking app, but
No, please don't. I will always encourage people to build apps.
well, you know what? I think that's a really good sentiment to end on. Everybody, go out there and make some more apps.
That's right.
Local first, if possible, but don't let it don't let it completely sidetrack you. Um, yeah. Anything? So you're working at Stripe. Anything you want to plug? Any people you want to thank? Shout outs? I don't know.
Well, I can the right now. Let's see. Some people come to mind. Shout out to Ryan Florence. He helped me. He gave me some contracts while I was building Actual. Always been really supportive of it. So I guess, yeah, that's my people shout out. Obviously, I'll plug Actual. If you go to actualbudget.com, that's the domain for Actual, and check it out. Hopefully you like it. There's a lot more features coming soon. And yeah, Stripe's always hiring. Stripe's a great company to work for. I've been really happy here. So you can always get in touch with me if you're looking for a job.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, James. Thanks for your time. Thanks for Prettier. I literally think of you, probably like once a week, I'm saving a document like, psh, thanks, James.
No problem. Glad I could help.
All right, man. Well, have a good week.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me.